My father uninvited me from his 61st birthday to keep standards high for the guest list. He wanted elite investors, not a daughter who works in operations. I did exactly what he asked and vanished. But he does not realize that with a single digital signature, I just pulled the anchor investment out of my brother-in-law's company days before the party starts. They are about to lose everything, and they still have no idea who is actually holding the knife. My name is Sarah Simmons. I am 38 years old, and if you looked at my employee badge for the Redwood Operations Bureau, you would see a woman who looks exactly like her job title suggests: dependable, invisible, the kind of person who keeps the engine running while the people in the nice suits take credit for the destination. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by the low hum of cooling fans and the rhythmic clatter of keyboards, staring at a quarterly logistics report that was 3 days overdue. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed with a frequency that seemed designed to induce migraines. But I did not mind. I liked the order here. I liked that in this gray carpeted expanse, inputs equaled outputs. If there was an error in column A, it showed up in column B. There was no ambiguity. My phone vibrated against the laminate desktop, breaking my concentration. I glanced down and saw the name Diane Simmons flashing on the screen. My mother. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. Diane Simmons did not call at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday unless she had an agenda that required immediate execution. I let it buzz twice, finishing a sentence in my report, before I picked up. I knew better than to make her wait, but I also knew better than to look eager. "Hello, Mother," I said, keeping my voice level. "Sarah?" she said. There was no greeting, no question about my health or my job. Her voice had that brittle, polished quality she used when she was trying to sell something unpleasant as a favor. "I am glad I caught you. I know you are busy with your paperwork." She always paused before the word paperwork, as if the mere concept was slightly unsanitary. "I am working." "Yes," I said. "What is going on?" "It is about your father's birthday," she said. "The big 6-1. We have finalized the plans." I leaned back in my chair, spinning a pen between my fingers. "I thought we were doing a dinner at the club. I cleared my schedule for next Saturday." "Change of plans," Diane said. The steel in her voice became apparent. "We are moving it to Mallory's estate," Dylan insisted. "He wants to host." Mallory was my older sister. Dylan Wexford was her husband, my brother-in-law, and the CEO of Halcyon Ridge Partners. Their estate was a sprawling monument to new money in the hills, the kind of place that had more bathrooms than residents, and a driveway that cost more than my first apartment. "Okay," I said. "I can drive out to Mallory's. It is an hour, but I can make it." "Actually, Sarah, that is what I wanted to talk to you about." Diane cut in. Her tone shifted into a lower gear, the one she used when she was explaining to a housekeeper why they were being let go. "Your father and I have been looking at the guest list. It has grown quite significantly. Dylan is inviting some very heavy hitters, key stakeholders, potential investors for his new fund, people from the city." I stopped spinning the pen. I knew exactly where this was going, but I wanted to hear her say it. I wanted her to put the words in the air where we could both smell them. And I asked, "And well, we think it would be best if you sat this one out," she said. The silence on the line was thick. I looked around my office. A colleague, Mike, was walking past with a stack of files, looking tired. He gave me a weak smile. I did not smile back. "You are uninviting me from Dad's birthday," I said. It was not a question. "Oh, stop being dramatic, Sarah," Diane sighed, the victim of my unreasonableness. "We are not uninviting you. We are simply suggesting that you would not enjoy yourself. These are intense people, Sarah, high finance, strategic partners, titans of industry. The conversation is going to be very elevated. We just want you to be comfortable. You know how you get in those crowds. You stand in the corner and look like you want to apologize for existing. It makes everyone else tense." "I see," I said. "So I would be an embarrassment." I did not say that, she said quickly. I said you would be uncomfortable. There is a difference. Look, we will do a family brunch on Sunday. Just us. Casual. You can wear your comfortable clothes. It will be better. Comfortable clothes, I repeated. She meant anything that wasn't a designer gown. She meant the clothes of a woman who worked in operations. It is decided, Sarah, she said, her voice hardening again. Do not make this difficult for your father. He is under a lot of pressure to make a good impression for Dylan. This party is important for the family business. We need everyone to be on point. Standards. Sarah, we have to maintain standards. Right, I said. Standards. I have to go, she said. The caterers are asking about the lobster bisque. We will see you Sunday. Bring a card. She hung up. I stared at the phone. The screen went black. I could feel a cold pressure behind my eyes. But it was not tears. It was clarity. It was the absolute, crystalline realization that to them, I was not a person. I was a prop that had failed audition. Before I could even set the phone down, it lit up again. Frank Simmons, my father. He never called. He had people who called people for him. If he was calling, it meant he thought Mother hadn't closed the deal. I answered. Hello, Dad? Your mother tells me you are being difficult, Frank said. His voice was a gravel grinder. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He went straight for the throat. I am not being difficult, I said. I was just informed that I'm not welcome at your birthday party because I do not meet the dress code of a strategic partnership. Do not twist her words, Frank snapped. Listen to me, Sarah. This is not a child's birthday party with cake and balloons. This is a networking event. Dylan is trying to close a massive round of funding for Halcyon Ridge. He has invited men who control hundreds of millions of dollars. These are sharks. They smell weakness. And I am the weakness, I said. You are out of your depth. Frank said. He sounded like he was explaining gravity to a toddler. Let us be realistic. Sarah, look at your life. You work at a bureau. You process forms. You manage logistics. That is fine. It is honest work. But you have nothing in common with these people. What are you going to talk to them about office supply procurement? The traffic on the interstate. His words were precise strikes. He knew exactly where to hit. He had spent 38 years mapping my insecurities so he could weaponize them whenever I stepped out of line. I can hold a conversation. Dad. I said. Not with these men. He said. They close million-dollar deals before lunch. They talk about market volatility, leverage, asset allocation. You would just stand there looking confused. It brings down the room. It lowers the standard. I want a room full of winners. Sarah, I want people who project success. When they look at your sister, they see the wife of a CEO. They see elegance. When they look at you, they see someone who settled. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Someone who settled? It is for your own good, Frank continued, his voice dropping to that patronizing register that drove me insane. Why put yourself through it? Why come and feel small? Stay home. Watch a movie. We will see you Sunday. It is better this way. We have to keep the standards high if Dylan is going to secure this capital. You want the family to succeed, don't you? The family. That magical entity that required my sacrifice but offered no shelter. I understand, I said. My voice surprised me. It was devoid of emotion. It was flat, cold, and utterly calm. It was the voice of someone who had just checked a box on a form. Good, Frank said. I knew you would be reasonable. Do not send a gift to the house. Bring it Sunday. Less clutter. I understand, I said again. Have fun. Dad? I hung up before he could say another word. I did not want to hear him dismiss me again. I placed the phone face down on the desk. The office around me continued its mindless churn. Phones rang. Printers whirred. Someone 2 rows over was laughing about a sports game. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting on the cool surface of the desk. I looked out the window. My office was on the fourth floor, overlooking a gray street in a gray district. Cars moved in sluggish lines, red taillights bleeding into the afternoon gloom. I realized something then, watching the traffic crawl. My family did not just think I was a failure. They needed me to be a failure. They needed Sarah the ops girl, Sarah the spinster, Sarah the disappointment, so they could shine brighter by comparison. I was the control group in their experiment of success. Without me at the bottom, they could not feel quite so high up at the top. They weren't just indifferent to my life. They were actively invested in my mediocrity. They didn't know me. They didn't want to know me. They only wanted the story of me that made them feel better about themselves. Sarah. I looked up. It was Mike again. He was holding a coffee cup. You okay? You look like you just swallowed a bug. I am fine, Mike, I said. Just family stuff. Ah. He nodded sympathetically. The worst kind. Hey, are we still on for the budget review at 4? Yes, I said. I will be there. He walked away. I watched him go. He was a nice man. He thought I was exactly what my father thought I was, a mid-level manager trying to keep the lights on. I turned back to my computer. The quarterly logistics report was still there on the screen, demanding my attention. I closed it. I minimized the email client. I minimized the internal chat. I stared at the desktop background, a generic blue swirl provided by IT. Then, I opened a specific program hidden deep within a nested folder structure that looked like archived system files. I typed in a 64-character password that I had memorized. The screen flickered, and a biometric prompt appeared. I placed my thumb on the scanner. Access granted. The screen changed. The gray and blue of the Redwood Operations Bureau vanished, replaced by a sleek, dark interface with columns of data running in real time. This was a world my father did not know existed. This was a world where standards were not determined by the cut of your suit or who you married, but by the brutal honesty of mathematics. I navigated through a series of shell companies, past layers of encryption and offshore trusts, until I reached a master spreadsheet. It was a beautiful thing, a complex, living map of capital flow that I had built over 15 years of trading, investing, and maneuvering in the shadows of the very markets my father claimed I could not understand. My eyes scanned the rows. Vanguard Holdings, Orion Debt Instruments, Cipher Real Estate Trust, and there, near the bottom, highlighted in a soft amber warning color, was the entry I was looking for. Entity Juniper Ledger Holdings, LLC, Position Anchor, Limited Partner Target Fund, Halcyon Ridge Partners. Fund 4, capital committed, $5 million. I looked at the number. $5 million. To my brother-in-law, Dylan. This money was the bedrock of his new fund. It was the smart money he bragged about to other investors to get them on board. It was the signal to the market that he was legitimate. He thought Juniper Ledger was some faceless conglomerate in Delaware. He had no idea that the signature on the authorization documents belonged to the woman he had joked should be a scheduling assistant. My father wanted high standards. He wanted to talk about closing million-dollar deals. He wanted to make sure the people in the room were elevated. I looked at the cursor blinking on the screen. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted me to be invisible so I wouldn't ruin their aesthetic. Okay, Dad, I whispered to the empty office. I will disappear. I moved my mouse to the tab marked Liquidity Events. If they wanted me gone, I would go. But I was going to take my standards with me, and I was fairly certain that without the $5 million from the sister-in-law he despised, Dylan's company was going to have a very hard time keeping the lights on for the party. I opened the details for the Juniper Ledger investment. I reviewed the terms. I looked at the clause I had written myself 2 years ago. A small, nasty little paragraph about reputational risk and unilateral withdrawal. I sat back in my chair. The office was still noisy, the world was still gray, but on my screen, the numbers were burning bright red. I had work to do, but it wasn't the kind Mike was waiting for. It was time to show my family exactly what happens when you underestimate the person who handles the operations. The screen before me was not just a spreadsheet, it was a cartography of silence. Most people look at a list of assets and see potential purchases: a beach house in Malibu, a vintage Porsche, a way to scream to the world that they have arrived. I looked at my portfolio and saw the opposite. I saw layers of insulation. I saw a fortress built of numbers and legal clauses designed to keep the world, and specifically my family, completely unaware of who I actually was. I scrolled through the structure. It was a beautiful, complex architecture that I had spent the last decade building while everyone assumed I was busy filing expense reports at the bureau. I had routed funds through a series of anonymous limited liability companies registered in Nevada and Wyoming, states where privacy was a commodity you could buy if you knew the right lawyers. From there, the capital flowed into blind trusts, and then into diversified equity positions. I owned stakes in mid-sized logistics firms in the Midwest. I held commercial paper in emerging tech sectors in Austin. I was a silent partner in a chain of urgent care clinics in Florida. But my eyes stopped, as they always did, on the line item that pulsed with a specific, toxic gravity: Halcyon Ridge Partners. It was my brother-in-law's private equity firm, to the outside world, and certainly to my father. Dylan Wexford was the golden boy. He was the self-made man who had pulled himself up by his bootstraps, a phrase he loved to use at dinner parties while swirling a glass of Pinot Noir that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He was the vision. He was the closer. He was the man who had married Mallory and elevated the Simmons name from comfortable upper middle class to wealthy elite. They did not know that the bootstraps he pulled on were actually my purse strings. 2 years ago. Dylan had been desperate. He had a slide deck, a shiny suit, and a lot of ambition, but he did not have the capital to close his first major fund. The institutional investors were skeptical. They wanted to see an anchor, a lead investor, who would put down a significant chunk of cash to validate the fund and reduce the risk for everyone else who followed. Without an anchor, there is no fund. Without a fund, there is no management fee, no carry, and no Dylan Wexford playing master of the universe. That was when Juniper Ledger Holdings, LLC, had appeared. I clicked on the folder for Juniper Ledger, to Dylan. This entity was just a faceless family office, perhaps represented by a boring attorney in Reno who communicated only via secure email. He had courted Juniper Ledger aggressively. He had sent emails promising 20% internal rates of return. He had begged, and Juniper Ledger had agreed, wiring $5 million into his account just hours before his deadline expired. That $5 million was the signal flare. Once Juniper committed, the other sheep followed. The smaller investors, the doctors and dentists and retirement funds, they all saw the anchor money and assumed someone smarter than them had done the due diligence. They piled in. Dylan was hailed as a genius. I sat back in my rigid office chair, the hum of the Redwood Operations Bureau fading into white noise. The irony was acidic. Dylan treated me like a piece of furniture that he wished he could put in storage. He spoke to me with that slow, over-enunciated tone people use for children or foreigners. He thought I was simple. He thought I was lucky to be allowed in the room. I closed my eyes and the memory of a dinner from last Thanksgiving washed over me, sharp and cold. We were at Mallory's house. The table was set with bone china and crystal. Dylan was holding court at the head of the table, cutting into a turkey with the precision of a surgeon, talking about a deal he had just missed. "It comes down to killer instinct," he had said, looking around the table to ensure everyone was admiring him. "You have to smell the blood in the water. That is why some people run companies and some people work for them. It is a biological imperative." He had looked at me then. It wasn't a hostile look. It was worse. It was pitying. "No offense, Sarah," he had said, flashing that capped tooth smile. "We need people like you. The world needs people to keep the trains running on time. You are structured. You are safe. Honestly, I think you are better suited as a scheduling assistant than trying to understand the volatility of these markets. You have an administrator's soul. It is quaint." My father had laughed. A short, sharp bark of approval. "Sarah is steady, Frank had said, raising his glass. Not everyone can be a racehorse. Someone has to be the plow mule. I had smiled down at my mashed potatoes, gripping my fork so hard I thought the metal might bend. I had not said a word. I had simply gone home that night, logged into my secure terminal, and bought another 10% of the debt notes his company was using to leverage their operational costs. An administrator's soul. I opened the calendar application on my second monitor. I needed to verify my suspicion. My mother had said the guest list for the birthday party was full of titans and strategic partners. My father had said it was about maintaining standards. I cross-referenced the dates. Today was the 14th. The party was on Saturday, the 18th. I pulled up the investor newsletter that Dylan sent out quarterly, the one he sent to Juniper Ledger. Thinking he was communicating with a board of directors in Nevada, there it was, buried in the forward-looking statements. Halcyon Ridge is poised to close Fund 4 with a target capitalization of $100 million by the 23rd of this month. We are hosting a final gala for our key partners to celebrate the synergy of our network. The puzzle pieces click together with the satisfying snap of a loaded gun. My father's 61st birthday party was not a birthday party. It was a closing dinner. It was a roadshow event. Dylan was using my father's social standing, the family's reputation, and the visual splendor of the estate to dazzle the pending investors for this new fund. He needed to show them a perfect tableau of American success: the beautiful wife, the respected father-in-law, the mansion, the stability, and I was the flaw in the diamond. I was the 40-ish, single woman working a mid-level job in operations. I did not fit the narrative of unbounded success. I was an outlier. If a potential investor asked me what I did, and I told them I managed logistics for a bureau, it would break the spell. It would remind them that failure, or at least mediocrity, was a genetic possibility in this family. I was being hidden away like a crazy relative in a Victorian novel, not because I was crazy, but because I was commercially unviable. The realization hit me, but it did not hurt. The pain had burned off years ago, leaving only a cold, hard slag of resolve. I looked at the Juniper Ledger interface again. My $5 million in his previous fund was the foundation, but more importantly, the terms of that investment gave me rights. I had negotiated them myself. Using a lawyer who thought I was representing a paranoid billionaire, I navigated to the Covenants and Rights tab. There was a clause, Section 4.2b, labeled Good Faith and Reputational Conduct. It was a standard clause, usually ignored. It stated that the limited partner me reserved the right to withdraw capital and demand immediate liquidation of positions if the general partner Dylan engaged in conduct that was deceptive, unethical, or materially misrepresented the nature of the partnership. Usually, this was used for fraud, but the wording was broad. Material misrepresentation of the partnership's stability. Dylan was currently selling his new fund based on the success of the old fund. He was selling it based on the stability of his anchor investors. He was projecting an image of absolute solidity. If the anchor pulled up specifically citing loss of confidence or ethical concerns right before the new fund closed, it would not just be a withdrawal, it would be a vote of no confidence from the biggest wallet in the room. It would be a scream in a library. I wasn't angry in the way people usually get angry. I didn't want to scream at my mother. I didn't want to throw a vase at my father. That was messy. That was emotional. That was the behavior of a plow mule who was frustrated with the harness. I felt something else entirely. I felt the cool, clinical detachment of a surgeon picking up a scalpel. I looked at the clock on my computer. It was 2:45 in the afternoon. If I sent the notice now, it would hit Dylan's compliance officer by 3. They would try to bury it. They would try to call the lawyer in Nevada, but the lawyer had strict instructions. No negotiation. Immediate execution. I thought about the standards my father loved so much. He wanted elite. He wanted powerful. He wanted people who moved markets. Well, Dad, I thought, you are about to meet the most powerful person you know, and you won't even see her face. I typed a command into the secure terminal to prepare the withdrawal documents. My fingers flew across the mechanical keys. The sound was rhythmic, precise. like gunfire in the distance. Drafting notice of immediate withdrawal. Reason breach of trust/strategic realignment. Amount 100% of holdings. I paused with my finger hovering over the execute key. They had made a calculation. They had calculated that my absence was worth more than my presence. They had calculated that hurting my feelings was an acceptable cost of doing business. They assumed I would go home, cry into a pint of ice cream, and show up on Sunday with a polite gift card, grateful for whatever scraps of affection they tossed from the table. They forgot one variable. They forgot to check who actually owned the table. I was not just the sister-in-law. I was the market, and the market was about to correct itself. If they wanted me to disappear, I would grant their wish. I would disappear so completely that the void I left behind would swallow the entire company. I would pull my money out, and with it, the artificial gravity that held Dylan's ego in orbit. I pressed the key. Processing the screen flashed green. Document signed. Delivery in progress. I minimized the window. The gray desktop of the Redwood Operations Bureau returned. I was just Sarah again, just the woman in the cubicle. I picked up my pen and went back to the quarterly logistics report. I had a job to do, after all. And unlike my brother-in-law, I actually knew how to work for a living. The first domino had just been tipped, and it was falling in slow motion towards Saturday night. I intended to be watching from a very safe distance when it landed. I slid my noise-canceling headphones over my ears. To the casual observer in the Redwood Operations Bureau, it looked like I was tuning out the office chatter to focus on a spreadsheet. In reality, I was engaging a secure, encrypted video uplink to an office in downtown Chicago. The screen on my private laptop flickered once, then stabilized. Noah Klein appeared. Noah was my portfolio director. He was a man composed entirely of sharp angles and expensive tailoring. Someone who spoke in bullet points and breathed risk assessments. He was the only person on earth who knew that the woman sitting in a cubicle in a gray office park was actually the majority shareholder of Juniper Ledger Holdings. To Noah, I was not a disappointed daughter or a sister-in-law. I was the principal, and when the principal called, Noah answered on the first ring. "Good afternoon," Noah said. His background was a blur of city lights, but his focus was entirely on the camera lens. "We are secure. What is the agenda?" I did not waste time with pleasantries. "Halcyon Ridge Partners," I said. "I need a full exposure analysis. Right now." Noah didn't blink. He typed something on his keyboard, the sound of mechanical keys sharp against the audio feed. "Pulling it up, we are the anchor LP in Fund 4, $5 million committed. We are also holding some secondary debt positions. Why are you hearing something on the street?" "I am hearing that they are desperate," I said. "I need to know exactly how much leverage they have built on top of our commitment." Noah's eyes scanned his monitors. "It is significant. They are utilizing a subscription line of credit. Basically, they have borrowed short-term cash from their prime broker using the capital commitments of their limited partners as collateral. Since Juniper Ledger is the anchor, meaning we are the most creditworthy entity in the pool, the bank's risk model is almost entirely weighted on us. We are the load-bearing wall." "So if the load-bearing wall moves," I asked, "the roof collapses." Noah said simply, "If Juniper pulls out, or even signals a loss of confidence, the bank issues a margin call on the subscription line immediately. Halcyon would have to pay back the borrowed cash within 24 hours. They do not have that kind of liquidity. They would default. The fund would implode before it even formally closes." It was exactly what I needed to hear. It was the mechanics of ruin, pure and simple. "I want out," I said. "I want to divest everything, today." Noah paused. It was the first time I had ever seen him hesitate. "We are close to the vesting period, but we are not there yet. A standard withdrawal requires a 90-day notice period, per the limited partnership agreement. If we rush it without cause, we pay a penalty fee of 12%. You want to eat a 12% loss just to exit?" "No," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "I do not pay penalties. I exact them. I want the fast lane. Noah, give me the nuclear option." Noah leaned forward, his professional mask tightening. The only way to bypass the 90-day lockup and the penalty is to trigger the key man clause or prove a material breach of good faith. We would have to prove that the general partner, your man Dylan Wexford, has acted in a way that fundamentally alters the risk profile of the investment or has violated ethical covenants. Ethical covenants, I repeated. That sounds promising. It is a high bar. Noah warned. We need proof. Hard evidence that he has lied to us, misused funds, or violated a specific term of our contract. General incompetence is not enough. Being a jerk is not enough. We need a smoking gun. I looked at the digital clock in the corner of my screen. You have access to their data room, don't you? As an anchor investor, we have audit rights. Limited audit rights, Noah corrected. But yes, I can access their investor portal and the repository of documents they have been sharing with prospective LPs. Scrub it, I ordered. Go through every slide deck, every email update, every memo they have uploaded in the last 6 months. Look for inconsistencies, look for exaggeration, and specifically, look for my name. Your name? Noah asked. Juniper Ledger's name. I clarified. We have a strict non-disclosure agreement. I am a silent partner. My identity and the identity of the entity is not to be used for marketing purposes. Check if he has been using us as a billboard. Understood. Noah said. Give me 5 minutes. The screen went silent, though the connection remained live. I watched Noah work. He was a blur of efficiency, opening documents, using keyword search algorithms, scanning legal text. I waited. Outside my office window, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long, melancholy shadows across the parking lot. My father was probably at the tailor right now, getting his tuxedo fitted for the party. My mother was probably yelling at a florist. Dylan was probably looking in a mirror, practicing his winning smile. They were all so sure of their positions. They thought the ground beneath them was solid rock. They did not know it was just a trapdoor held shut by my patience. Got you. Noah said. The sudden sound of his voice snapped me back to the screen. Show me. I said. It is a pitch deck. Noah said. Uploaded 3 days ago, targeted at a group of institutional investors in Hong Kong. Slide 12. Strategic partners and anchors. He shared his screen. There, in bold, sans serif font, was the logo for Juniper Ledger Holdings, LLC, and underneath it, a line of text that made my blood run cold and then boil with triumph. Anchor Capital. Provided by Juniper Ledger Holdings, a strategic family office with a 20-year track record of high-yield stability. He listed us, Noah said, sounding offended on a professional level. He explicitly named Juniper Ledger to validate his fund to foreign investors. That is a direct violation of the confidentiality and anonymity rider in our side letter. He is trading on our reputation without a license. He got greedy, I said softly. He needed the credibility, so he stole it. There is more, Noah said. I am looking at an internal memo. It was accidentally included in a folder marked Logistics that was shared with the general data room. Amateur hour. It looks like a briefing document for his team regarding the event this Saturday. The birthday party, I said. He calls it the summit, Noah corrected, reading from the document. Listen to this. Objective utilized the social capital of the Simmons Estate event to finalize commitments from the holdout group. The optics of the family legacy and the high net worth attendance are critical to overcoming due diligence hesitation. We need to close the gap before Monday morning. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was confirmation, written in black and white. My father's birthday was not a celebration. It was a bait-and-switch operation. Dylan was not just inviting investors. He was orchestrating a theater piece where my family were the unpaid actors. He is using the party to manipulate hesitant investors, I said. He is creating a false environment of security. It is deceptive marketing, Noah said, his voice hardening. He is implying that the family's wealth backs the fund. which is not true. He is implying that the social setting equates to financial due diligence, and he is doing it while breaching our anonymity. Sarah, this is not just a breach of contract. This is moral hazard. If we stay in, and this fund goes sideways, we could be sued by other investors for letting him use our name to lure them in. That is the lever, I said. It is a crowbar. Noah agreed. We can draft a notice of immediate withdrawal based on material breach of confidentiality and reputational risk. We can cite the pitch deck as Exhibit A and the internal memo as Exhibit B. We can argue that the general partner has demonstrated a lack of fiduciary responsibility. Do it, I said. The effect will be catastrophic, Noah warned, purely as a matter of procedure. Once we send this, we are required to notify the fund administrator. The administrator will have to flag the fund. The credit line will freeze within the hour. The other investors will get a notification that the anchor has pulled out for cause. It will trigger a run on the bank. Dylan will not just lose our money, he will lose everyone's. I looked at the image of the pitch deck on the screen. I looked at the lie Dylan had told the world that he had the backing of a strategic family office. He did have it, and he had treated that office like he treated his sister-in-law with arrogance and disrespect. Draft the letter, I said, my voice steady. But I want one specific addition. Name it, Noah said. I want a clause that explicitly forbids any negotiation or communication attempts. I said, state that any attempt to contact the principal of Juniper Ledger directly, outside of legal counsel, will be considered harassment and will result in further legal action. I want to cut the phone lines. Noah, when this hits him, I want him screaming into the void. Understood. Noah typed rapidly. Drafting now. Pursuant to Section 8, Paragraph 3. Breach of non-disclosure, immediate liquidation of interest. Okay, it is ready for your digital signature. A secure document window popped up on my screen. It was dense with legalese, but the message was simple. Game over. I hovered my mouse over the signature field. I thought about my mother telling me I would be uncomfortable. I thought about my father telling me I didn't have the standards to be in the room. They were right. I didn't have their standards. My standards were absolute. You do not lie to your investors. You do not use people as props. And you never, ever assume that the quiet person in the corner is powerless. Send it, I said. I clicked the mouse. A small animation of a pen signing a document played on the screen. Status sent. Time 3:14 p.m. The letter is out, Noah confirmed. I am notifying the fund administrator now. The clock has started. Thank you. Noah? I said. Close the file. Sarah? Noah said, his tone shifting slightly. Just so you know, from a purely financial perspective, this is a brutal kill. I have seen hostile takeovers with more mercy. It is not a takeover. Noah, I said, reaching for the button to end the call. It is a lesson in value. I severed the connection. The screen went black, then returned to my innocuous blue desktop background. I took off my headphones and placed them neatly in my drawer. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold. I stood up and walked to the break room to pour the stale liquid down the sink. Mike passed me in the hallway. Hey, Sarah, you look intense. Everything okay with the logistics report? It is handled, Mike, I said. I just cleared a major blockage in the pipeline. He laughed, thinking I was talking about supply chains. That is why you are the best, Sarah, always fixing the mess. Yes, I said, walking back to my desk. Always fixing the mess. I sat down and opened a new email. It was a request from HR to confirm my vacation days for the holidays. I began to type a response, my heart rate steady, my breathing even. Somewhere in the city, a notification ping was about to sound on Dylan Wexford's phone. Somewhere, a bank algorithm was turning a green light to red. The invisible machinery I had set in motion was beginning to grind, and the sound it made was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. I was not at the party, but I had just blown out the candles. The digital clock on the lower right corner of my monitor read 3:34 in the afternoon. It had been exactly 20 minutes since I authorized the withdrawal letter. In the high-speed world of electronic finance, 20 minutes is an eternity. It is enough time for a server to process a request, for a compliance officer to choke on their coffee, and for a notification to travel from a secure server in Chicago to a smartphone in a luxury office in downtown Phoenix. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting on the cool laminate of my desk. The office around me was in its usual mid-afternoon lull. Someone was microwaving popcorn in the break room. The smell of artificial butter drifted through the air, banal and comforting. Then, the vibration started. It began as a low hum against the wood of the desk. My personal phone, face down next to my mousepad, buzzed once, then again. Then it began to dance across the surface, a continuous, frantic spasm of notifications. I did not turn it over. I knew who it was. The timeline was proceeding exactly as I had modeled it. First came the texts. I could see the glow of the screen reflecting off the polished base of my monitor stand. The flashes were rapid fire, strobe-like. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I finally reached out and flipped the phone over, not to answer, but to observe. The lock screen was a cascade of notifications from Mallory. Pick up the phone. Sarah, are you at work? Pick up. Dylan is freaking out. What is happening? The bank just called. They said the credit line is frozen. Sarah, please pick up. I watched the messages stack up like cars in a pileup. The panic was palpable even through the text. Mallory was not a woman who handled crisis well. Her life was curated for comfort, not catastrophe. Then the phone rang in earnest. The screen lit up with a photo of my sister, smiling at a beach resort, a drink in her hand. It was a picture from happier times, or at least times when the illusion of happiness was cheaper to maintain. I let it ring. It went to voicemail. 2 seconds later, it rang again. This time it was Mom. I let that one go to voicemail too. I turned back to my work computer. I opened a spreadsheet tracking the fleet maintenance schedules for the Bureau's transport division. I typed in a value for tire rotation frequency. The mundane nature of the task was grounding. While their world was burning down, I was ensuring that government sedans got their oil changed on time. Buzz. Dad. My father was calling. This was the escalation point. Frank Simmons did not call to chat. He called to command. If he was dialing me directly, it meant Mallory had already called him, screaming, and Dylan was likely in a state of incoherent rage. I pressed the volume button on the side of the phone, silencing the ringer. I did not decline the call. I just let it ring into the void. To decline is an action. It is a response. To ignore is to be an inanimate object, a wall that cannot be argued with. My secure laptop, the one connected to the Juniper Ledger interface, pinged with a soft, melodious chime. It was a priority notification from Noah. I swiveled my chair slightly to the left, shielding the screen from the open office. From Noah Klein. Subject FWD urgent / meeting request. Halcyon Ridge Partners. To Principal Sarah. See below. The fish has taken the bait. He is bypassing the fund administrator and trying to go straight to the source. Instructions below. Noah's note was the forwarded email from Dylan. I read it, and a cold smile touched my lips. From Dylan Wexford, CEO, Halcyon Ridge Partners, to Juniper Ledger Holdings, General Inquiries. Subject urgent. Clarification of withdrawal notice. To the managing partners of Juniper Ledger. We received your notice regarding the withdrawal of capital commitment from Fund 4. There seems to be a significant misunderstanding. The formatting of our pitch deck was a clerical error by a junior analyst, not a breach of confidentiality. We value Juniper Ledger as our primary partner. I am requesting an immediate emergency Zoom call or in-person meeting with the principal to clarify this situation before the close of business today. This withdrawal will cause unnecessary disruption to our other LPs. We can renegotiate the fee structure if that is the issue. Please respond immediately. Best, Dylan Wexford. Clerical error by a junior analyst. He was blaming an intern. Classic Dylan. He would throw anyone under the bus to keep his suit clean. And the line about renegotiating the fee structure, he thought this was a shakedown. He thought I wanted more money. He could not conceive of a world where someone would walk away from a deal simply because of principle. I typed my reply to Noah. To Noah Klein. From principle, do not engage. Send the standard rejection template, the one we use for unsolicited solicitations. Add a line stating that the decision is final and based on irreversible loss of fiduciary confidence. Do not offer a meeting. Do not give him a name. Let him sweat. I hit send. The phone on my desk, the office landline, rang. This was unexpected. My family did not have my direct desk extension at the bureau. I kept my work life and my family life rigorously separated. I picked up the receiver. Sarah Simmons, Operations. Ms. Simmons. It was the receptionist from the lobby downstairs. Her voice was tight, pitched high with anxiety. I am so sorry to disturb you, but there is a gentleman here to see you, a Mr. Frank Simmons. He says he is your father. I paused. He had driven here. He had gotten in his car, driven 20 minutes across town, and was now standing in the lobby of my workplace. The desperation was moving faster than I had anticipated. He is shouting, Ms. Simmons, the receptionist whispered. He is demanding to be let up. He says it is a family emergency. Security is getting nervous. I closed my eyes for a second. I could picture him, Frank Simmons, face flushed, intimidating a 20-year-old receptionist because he felt the world owed him immediate access. He was violating my workspace. He was crossing the one boundary I had managed to keep intact. In the past, the old Sarah would have rushed downstairs, apologized to everyone, and dragged him out to the parking lot to be yelled at in private. I would have tried to minimize the scene. I would have tried to protect his dignity, but I wasn't protecting him anymore. It is okay, Jessica, I said, my voice calm. He is my father. You can send him up. Oh, okay. She sounded relieved. Shall I send him to your desk? No, I said. I looked around the open plan office. My cubicle was functional, but it was small. It was a subordinate space, if he saw me here. Surrounded by stacks of paper and family photos, he would fall right back into his rhythm of dominance. He would see the ops girl. Is conference room A available? I asked. The Skyline room. Jessica asked. I think so. It is empty right now. Book it for me. I said. Send him there. Tell him to wait. I will be with him in 5 minutes. Yes, ma'am. I hung up. Conference room A was not just a room. It was the showpiece of the bureau. It was a glass-walled enclosure on the corner of the building, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. It had a long mahogany table, leather chairs, and soundproofing that sucked the noise out of the air. It was a room designed for power. I stood up. I smoothed my skirt. I picked up a generic file folder. It was empty. But props are important, and my tablet. I did not rush. I walked to the break room and poured myself a glass of water. I took a sip. Then, I walked toward the Skyline room, through the glass walls. I saw him. Frank Simmons was pacing. He was wearing his golf polo and khakis, a blazer thrown hastily over the top. He looked out of place against the sleek, modern minimalism of the conference room. He was red in the face, checking his watch, then looking at the door, then checking his watch again. He looked like a caged animal. I opened the heavy glass door and stepped inside. The sound of the office, the phones, the chatter vanished as the door clicked shut behind me. The silence in the room was absolute. Dad, I said. He spun around. Sarah. He marched toward me, his finger already raised in accusation. What the hell is wrong with you? Do you know what kind of day we are having? Mallory is hysterical. Dylan is on the line with lawyers. And you are sitting here playing secretary. I am working, Dad. I said. I did not back up. I walked past him to the head of the table. I placed my folder down. I placed my tablet down. Then, I sat in the chair usually reserved for the bureau chief. The action confused him. He stopped in the middle of the room. He was used to me standing, shifting my weight, looking at the floor. He was not used to me sitting at the head of a mahogany table with the city skyline framing my silhouette. Working, he sputtered. Your brother-in-law's company is under attack. Someone is trying to destroy the fund days before the closing, and you are not answering your phone. I saw the calls, I said. I was in the middle of a report. A report. He slammed his hand on the back of a leather chair. Who cares about your report? Dylan needs family support right now. He thinks a competitor is sabotaging him. He needs us to rally. I need you to run an errand. An errand? I repeated. Yes, an errand. Frank shouted, We need cash liquidity immediately to cover a margin requirement while he sorts this out. I need you to go to the bank and sign over that trust fund your grandmother left you. It is not much, but it might buy him 24 hours. I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. Even in the midst of a crisis he didn't understand. His first instinct was to strip mine my assets to save Dylan. My grandmother's trust was $60,000. It was my safety net. And he wanted to throw it into the furnace of Dylan's incompetence without even asking. No, I said. The word hung in the air. Frank blinked. What did you say? I said no. I crossed my hands on the table. I am not signing over my trust, and I am not running errands. He looked at me as if I had started speaking a dead language. Have you lost your mind? This is for the family. If Dylan's fund collapses, do you know what happens? The reputation of this family. The reputation of your family, I corrected. You made it very clear earlier today that I am not part of that reputation. I do not meet the standards. Remember. Frank's face turned a darker shade of crimson. This is not the time for your petty grudges. Sarah, you are being selfish. You are punishing us because you got uninvited from a party. Grow up, this is business. Yes, I said. It is business. I tapped the screen of my tablet. It lit up. And in business, when an investor loses confidence, they withdraw. That is how the market works. Frank froze. The gears in his head were grinding, trying to connect the dots, but the picture was too impossible for him to see. What do you know about investors? What do you know about the market? I know enough. I said. You know nothing. He yelled, his voice echoing slightly in the soundproof room. You file papers. You answer phones. You are a 40-year-old woman who lives alone and works in a government bureau. Do not lecture me about the market. I stood up. I didn't do it quickly. I rose slowly, deliberately. I leaned forward, placing my palms flat on the table. The posture forced him to look up at me. Dad, I said. My voice was drop-dead quiet. Why is Dylan panicked? Because the anchor investor pulled out. Frank shouted, waving his arms. Some group called Juniper Ledger. They cited a breach of confidentiality. They are trying to ruin him. And why did they cite a breach of confidentiality? I asked. Because Dylan used their name in a slide deck. It was a mistake. A typo. It was not a typo. I said. He lied. He used a silent partner's name to solicit money from foreign investors. He broke a contract. Frank stopped moving. He stared at me. His eyes narrowed. How do you know that? I hadn't told him. Dylan hadn't told him the specifics. Dylan would never admit to the lie. Dylan would have just said, they pulled out. How do you know about the slide deck? Frank asked again. His voice had lost its volume. It was replaced by a creeping, confused dread. I walked around the edge of the table. I moved closer to the glass wall, looking out at the city. Because I read it, I said. You read it. Where did Dylan send it to you? No, I said. I turned to face him. The afternoon sun was behind me, casting my face in shadow, while the light hit him full on, revealing every line of stress, every bead of sweat on his forehead. Dylan did not send it to me. I accessed it. Access. Frank shook his head. I don't understand. Are you working for them? Are you working for Juniper Ledger? He looked at my suit. He looked at the expensive conference room. He looked at the way I was standing. He was trying to recalibrate 38 years of assumptions in 30 seconds. You could say that, I said. Well, call them. Frank grasped at this new straw. If you work for them, talk to them. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. Tell them Dylan is family. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. They know who Dylan is. Dad. That is the problem. Sarah, please. Frank stepped closer, his voice pleading now. If you have any pull there, any influence at all, you have to use it. Fix this, for me. I did use my influence, I said. What? I used my influence to enforce the standards. I said, high standards. That is what you wanted, isn't it? You didn't want a daughter who lowers the bar. You wanted excellence. You wanted consequences for mediocrity. Frank stopped. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in his life. He looked at the cold intelligence in my eyes. He looked at the total absence of the nervous, apologetic daughter he had bullied for decades. He realized then that something was wrong. Something was fundamentally different. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had inverted. He was the one sweating in a cheap blazer. I was the one standing in the glass tower. Sarah, he whispered. The anger was gone, replaced by a terrifying uncertainty. What did you do? I didn't answer. I just looked at him. You knew the details, he muttered, thinking out loud. You knew about the slide deck. You knew the reason. You are not just a secretary there, are you? He took a step back, as if I were physically dangerous. Who are you? He asked. The question hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I am the person you uninvited, I said. I am the operations girl. No, Frank said, shaking his head slowly. No, you are not. You are doing this. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He staggered slightly, gripping the back of a chair for support. Who are you? Really, Sarah? I looked at my watch. I have a meeting in 5 minutes. Dad, you should go. Dylan is going to need you. I hear the traffic is terrible this time of day. You have a connection to them, Frank said. It was not a question anymore. It was an accusation. He was looking at me like I was a stranger who had just confessed to a crime. You are not just a logistical support staff member. You are involved with Juniper Ledger. Are you their compliance officer? Is that it? Did you flag this because you were angry about the party, and you used your position to hurt Dylan? He was still trying to fit me into a box he understood. In his world, I could be a disgruntled employee. I could be a petty bureaucrat. But I could not be a peer. I leaned back in the leather chair, the leather creaking softly in the silence of the skyline room. You really do not see me, do you, Dad? I asked. Even now, even when the building is burning down, you are still looking for the matches in the wrong pocket. Answer the question. Sarah. Frank snapped. He slammed his hand on the mahogany table. What is your relationship to the entity that is destroying your sister's life? My relationship is ownership. I said. The words hung there, simple, heavy. Frank blinked. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish pulled out of the water, gasping for air that his lungs could not process. What, he whispered, Juniper Ledger Holdings is a single-member LLC, I said, keeping my voice conversational, as if explaining a copier jam. It is a pass-through entity designed to manage alternative asset allocations. It is fully capitalized by the Simmons Vance Trust, and I am the sole trustee, beneficiary, and managing director of that trust. I don't understand, Frank said. He genuinely did not. The Simmons Vance Trust. That does not exist. Your grandmother left you $60,000. That is it. Grandma left me $60,000 in 2005. I corrected. I did not spend it on a wedding. Dad, I did not spend it on a down payment for a house in the suburbs to impress the neighbors. I put it into the market. I leveraged it. I learned derivatives. I played the long side of the tech boom and the short side of the housing crash. I built it. Brick by brick, trade by trade, while you were busy telling everyone how proud you were of Dylan's potential. Frank stared at me. He looked at my plain gray suit. He looked at my sensible shoes. He looked at the lack of jewelry on my wrists. You have $5 million. he asked. The number sounded alien in his mouth when applied to me. I have significantly more than $5 million. I said. $5 million was just the allocation I set aside for high-risk family charity. That is what Dylan was to me. Dad, charity. I knew his fundamentals were weak. I knew he was mostly hot air and hair gel, but I thought, he makes Mallory happy. He makes you happy. So I became the anchor. I gave him the credibility he could not earn on his own. Frank sat down. He didn't choose to sit. His legs simply gave out. He collapsed into the chair opposite me, the bluster draining out of him like water from a cracked vase. You, he murmured. You are the anchor. I am, I said, and I am the one who pulled the plug. He sat there for a long moment, processing the rewrite of history happening in his head. Then, the shock began to morph into something else, indignation. The old reflex kicked in, the need to control, the need to be the patriarch who dictates reality. He straightened up. He hardened his jaw. Then fix it, he ordered. I raised an eyebrow. Excuse me. You heard me, Frank said, his voice regaining some of its gravel. If this is you, then this is over. You made your point. You showed us you are smart. Congratulations. Now, pick up that phone, call your lawyer, or whoever handles the paperwork, and rescind the withdrawal. Tell them it was a mistake. Wire the money back. I looked at him with genuine fascination. You think I did this to show off? You think this is a tantrum? I think you are hurt because of the party, Frank said, dismissing my entire career with a wave of his hand. I get it. It was harsh. Your mother can be blunt. But you cannot burn down the family business just because your feelings are hurt. Sarah, that is childish. That is irresponsible. Now that I know it is you, I am telling you to stop. We will find a place for you at the party. We will put you at a good table. Just fix this. We will put you at a good table. The phrase echoed in the room. It was the ultimate concession in his mind. He was offering me a seat at the table I had bought and paid for, and he expected gratitude. No, I said. Frank's face turned purple. What do you mean? No, I am your father. I am telling you to save your sister's husband from bankruptcy. And I am telling you that Dylan violated his contract, I said, my voice cutting through his volume like a razor. He lied to his investors. He used my money and my name to peddle a lie. I do not do business with liars. Dad, that is my standard. You want high standards? That is what they look like. They look like consequences. He is family, Frank shouted. So am I. I shouted back. It was the first time I had raised my voice. The sound cracked the air in the room. Frank flinched. I am family too, I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. But you never treated me like one. You treated me like a staff member. You treated me like a flawed prototype. That is not true, Frank protested weakly. It is true, I said. Let us play a game, Dad. A trivia game. What is the name of the cat I have had for 6 years? Frank stared at me. I don't know. Where do I live? I asked. Not the city, the street. What is my address? He opened his mouth, then closed it. What is the name of the last guy I dated? I continued. What is my favorite movie? What am I allergic to? Silence. You don't know, I said. You don't know anything about me. You know I work in ops. You know I'm single. You know I am not as pretty as Mallory. That is the sum total of your knowledge of your daughter. But you know Dylan's golf handicap. You know Dylan's favorite scotch. You know the name of Dylan's tailor. That is different, Frank muttered. We have things in common. You have nothing in common. I said, you have a delusion in common. You think you are both masters of the universe, but you are just two men in expensive suits trying to convince everyone else you matter. I have given you everything, Frank said, retreating to the classic defense. I paid for your college. I gave you a good start. And then you stopped looking at me. I said, you decided I was finished. You decided I had hit my ceiling. Sarah is steady. Sarah is the plow mule. You boxed me in, Dad. And when I tried to step out of that box not by asking for your help, but by building something of my own, you uninvited me from your birthday because I didn't match the decor. It wasn't about the decor, Frank said. It was about business. I told you. Dylan needed the right environment. Right, I said. The environment. Let us talk about that. I reached into the leather folder I had brought into the room. I pulled out a single, stapled document. It was a printout of the internal memo Noah had found, the summit strategy document. I slid it across the mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Frank's hands. Read the highlighted section, I said. Frank looked down. He didn't want to read it. He wanted to leave, but he couldn't. He picked up the paper. Read it out loud, I commanded. Frank cleared his throat. He squinted at the text. Strategy for Saturday event. Goal leverage, the legacy asset. He stopped. Keep reading, I said. What is the legacy asset? Frank's voice shook. Legacy asset refers to Frank Simmons. Objective is to utilize the subject's social standing and implied financial backing to reassure the holdout group. Subject should be positioned as the patriarch and silent guarantor. Note, ensure subject stays on script regarding family unity and avoids discussing specific liquidity questions. Frank lowered the paper. His face was pale. Subject, he whispered. He called me a subject. He called you a prop, I said brutally. You were not the guest of honor. Dad, you were the bait. He needed you there to look rich and happy so that people would give him money. He wasn't celebrating your 61 years on Earth. He was harvesting your reputation because he had run out of his own. Frank looked at the paper again. Silent guarantor implies financial backing. He was going to let people believe you were backing the fund. I said, if the fund collapsed later, who do you think those angry investors would come looking for? They would remember the party. They would remember you shaking their hands. They would remember the implication that the Simmons family stood behind the deal. Frank looked up at me. The arrogance was completely gone. In its place was the hollow look of a man who realizes he has been the punchline of a joke he didn't know was being told. He used me. Frank said, he played you. I said, he played to your vanity. He told you about high standards and elite guests because he knew you would eat it up. He knew that if he flattered your ego, you would do exactly what he wanted, including cutting out the one person who might have actually asked a tough question. You, Frank said. Me. I confirmed. I work in operations. Remember, I spot inefficiencies. I spot risks. If I had been at that party, I might have noticed that the strategic partners were actually sharks smelling blood. I might have asked Dylan why his leverage ratio was so high. He couldn't risk that. So he had you do his dirty work. He had you uninvite me. Frank dropped the paper on the table. It slid a few inches and stopped. I didn't know, he said. His voice was quiet, almost a child's voice. I thought he respected me. I thought he wanted to show me off. He wanted to show off your silhouette, I said. Not you. Frank rubbed his face with his hands. He looked old. For the first time, he looked every single one of his 61 years. The powerful patriarch was gone, replaced by a tired man in a conference room. I uninvited my own daughter, he said, staring at the table. For a man who calls me a subject in a memo. Yes, I said. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet. Sarah, He stopped. He didn't know how to apologize. He hadn't apologized to anyone since 1995. The muscles for it had atrophied. You don't have to say it, I said. I don't want an apology right now. It wouldn't be real. You are only sorry because you got caught, and because you realized you aren't the king of the castle anymore. That is not fair, Frank said, but there was no heat in it. Fair is a place where they judge pigs. Dad, I said, this is reality, and the reality is, Dylan is going down, the withdrawal is processed, the bank knows, the other investors will know by tonight. Halcyon Ridge is finished. He will lose everything, Frank said. Mallory the house. They will lose the things they can't pay for. I said, "That is how the world works for everyone else. Why should they be different?" Frank stood up slowly. He looked at the door. He looked back at me. "Are you coming to the party?" he asked. It was a ridiculous question, but it was the only way he knew how to ask if we were still a family. "The party is on Saturday." I said, "Today is Tuesday. A lot is going to happen between now and Saturday, but if there is no company—" Frank trailed off. "Will there still be a party?" "Oh, there will be a party," I said. "Dylan can't cancel it. If he cancels it, he admits defeat instantly. He has to play this out to the bitter end. He has to hope he can charm someone into saving him before the dessert is served." I stood up too. I smoothed my skirt. "I won't be there as a guest, Dad," I said. "I won't be there to eat the lobster or smile at the bankers. I am done being the extra in your movie." "Then what will you do?" Frank asked. I walked to the door and opened it. The sounds of the office rushed back and phones ringing. People talking, the mundane hum of work. "I will come," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "But I will come on my own terms, and I will come when the check arrives." Frank looked at me for one last second. He looked at the stranger he had raised. Then he nodded, picked up his jacket, and walked out the door. He didn't look back. He walked toward the elevator like a man carrying a very heavy weight. I watched him go. Then I closed the glass door, walked back to the head of the table, and sat down. I looked out at the skyline. The sun was setting, painting the city in shades of bruised purple and gold. I picked up my tablet. I had one more email to send. The legacy asset had been neutralized. Now it was time to deal with the subject. I did not attend the 61st birthday party of Frank Simmons. I was not one of the 150 guests who drove their Teslas and G-Wagons up the winding, private road to the estate in Cedar Bluff, Arizona. I did not hand my coat to the hired staff, nor did I accept a glass of vintage champagne from a tray held by a model who was being paid $300 an hour to smile. However, in the world of high finance, absence is sometimes more powerful than presence. And thanks to the forensic reconstruction provided by Noah's network and the inevitable gossip that flows like sewage through the gutters of the upper class, I know exactly what happened that night. I can see it as clearly as if I had been watching through the lens of a security camera. The stage was set perfectly. Cedar Bluff is where the new money goes when it wants to feel old. It is a landscape of manicured desert, infinity pools that drop off into canyons, and architecture that screams aggressive serenity. Mallory and Dylan's house was a masterpiece of glass and steel, perched on a ridge that overlooked the valley. For the night, they had transformed it into a fortress of quiet luxury. The dress code was strictly enforced, no logos. Just cashmere, silk, and the kind of beige linen that costs more than a mid-sized sedan. The security was tighter than a diplomatic summit. Private guards with earpieces patrolled the perimeter, checking names against a digital list on iPads. The message was clear. This was an exclusive club. If you were inside, you were safe. You were one of the chosen. Dylan Wexford stood at the entrance, playing the role of the benevolent monarch. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that fit him a little too tightly across the chest. He was greeting guests with the manic energy of a man trying to hold back a tsunami with a cocktail napkin. He gripped hands too firmly. He laughed too loudly at jokes that were not funny. He was trying to project stability, but he smelled like adrenaline and fear. The summit strategy was in full swing. Every interaction Dylan had was calculated. He would guide a potential investor toward the bar, gesture vaguely at the view, and say things like, "We are just so blessed to have this foundation," or "Family is the ultimate asset class." Then, he would point to my father. Frank Simmons was standing near the fireplace, holding a scotch he was not drinking. He looked the part of the legacy asset. He was distinguished, silver-haired, and stoic. But people who looked closely, and these guests were people who looked closely for a living, would have noticed that Frank was stiff. He was not mingling. He was standing on his mark like an actor waiting for a cue that never came. He was watching Dylan with a new, terrifying clarity. Since our conversation in the glass conference room earlier this week, the scales had fallen from his eyes. He wasn't seeing a son-in-law anymore. He was seeing a parasite in a tuxedo. The party moved in a comfortable rhythm for the first hour. The jazz band played soft covers of pop songs. The catering staff circulated with lobster tartlets. It was the perfect picture of American success. And then, the whisper started. It didn't start with a shout. It started with a notification on a phone. A man in a velvet blazer, a hedge fund manager from New York. A heavy hitter in the distressed debt market checked his BlackBerry. He frowned. He leaned over to the woman next to him, a venture capitalist from Palo Alto. They exchanged a few words. They looked at Dylan, then they looked at their phones again. The information I had released, the formal notice of withdrawal from the anchor investor, had hit the rumor mill. In the tight-knit world of private equity, bad news travels faster than light. The New York investor waited until Dylan was near the bar, refilling his drink. He walked over, his movement predatory and smooth. "Dylan," the man said. His voice was low, but in the acoustic perfection of the room. It carried, "Great party. Really impressive spread." "Thanks, Jim." Dylan beamed, turning on the charm. "We wanted to do something special for Frank. He is the bedrock. You know." "Right," Jim said. He took a sip of his bourbon. "Speaking of bedrock, I am hearing some noise on the wire tonight. Strange noise. Something about your anchor LP." The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. The guests nearby stopped their conversations. They didn't turn around, that would be rude, but they leaned in. They were listening. Noise? Dylan laughed, but the sound was brittle. "You know how the rumor mill is, Jim. People love to talk. We are solid, oversubscribed, actually." "That is not what I heard," Jim said, his eyes drilling into Dylan. "I heard Juniper Ledger pulled the plug. Total divestment, effective immediately. And the word breach is being tossed around." Dylan's smile froze. It didn't disappear. It just turned into a rictus mask of terror. "That is a misunderstanding, a clerical issue. We are sorting it out with legal. It is a technicality." "A technicality?" Jim raised an eyebrow. "Losing your anchor days before the close is a technicality, if they are out. Dylan, that triggers the covenant on your credit line. You are swimming naked." "We are not naked." Dylan snapped. The veneer cracked. "We have plenty of liquidity. The Simmons family is fully behind this fund. My father-in-law." "Leave him out of it." The voice came from the fireplace. Frank Simmons stepped forward. He walked into the circle of silence that had formed around the bar. He looked at Dylan, and for the first time in years, he didn't look like a prop. He looked like a father who was done being sold. "Dad," Dylan said, his eyes widening. "I was just explaining to Jim here." "I heard you," Frank said. "You were talking about liquidity. You were talking about covenants." Frank looked at Jim. "I don't know the details of your world, sir. I am just a retired man celebrating a birthday, but I know what a man looks like when he is lying." The room went deadly silent. Mallory, who had been holding court near the patio, rushed over. Her face was flushed. She grabbed Frank's arm. "Dad, what are you doing? You have had too much to drink. Come sit down." She turned to the guests, flashing a desperate, blinding smile. "He is just tired. It has been a long week. You know how seniors get when they skip their nap?" She tried to laugh. Nobody joined her. "I am not tired, Mallory," Frank said, shaking off her arm. "And I am not senile. I am just listening. I am listening to words I should have learned a long time ago. Risk, breach, standard. This is Sarah's fault," Mallory hissed, her voice low and venomous, intended only for the family but audible to the front row. "She put these ideas in your head. She is trying to ruin this night because she is jealous. She is unstable. Dad, you know she is. Unstable." The new voice belonged to a man standing near the hors d'oeuvres table. He was a quiet man in a gray suit, a former compliance officer who now consulted for major institutional funds. He was a contact of Noah's. He stepped forward. "I do not know about family drama." The man said, "But I know Juniper Ledger. I used to work with their external audit team years ago. They are the gold standard for privacy. They never, ever let their name be used in marketing materials. It is their #1 rule." He looked at Dylan. "I saw your deck, Dylan. You had their logo on slide 12. I thought it was odd at the time. I thought, wow, Dylan must have some incredible leverage to get Juniper to agree to that. But you didn't get them to agree. Did you?" Dylan opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a deer in the headlights of a semi-truck. "You breached their anonymity," the man concluded, his voice factual and cold. "That is not a clerical error. That is gross negligence. If you did that to them, what are you doing with our data? Who else are you selling out to get a quick signature?" The party didn't end. It mutated. It transformed from a celebration into an inquisition. The guests, who moments ago were sipping champagne, were now pulling out their phones. They were calling their analysts. They were calling their risk managers. "Is my exposure segregated?" One man asked into his phone, turning his back on Dylan. "Get me the term sheet for Halcyon," another woman said, walking rapidly toward the exit. "I want to check the clawback provision." Dylan was running around the room like a firefighter with an empty hose. He grabbed elbows. He pleaded, "It is fine. I have a meeting with them on Monday. It is just a negotiation tactic. Please, everyone, let us cut the cake." But the high standards had shifted. The standard in the room was no longer about who had the best suit or the biggest house. It was about survival. And Dylan Wexford had just been identified as a contagion. Frank stood alone in the center of the chaos. The guests parted around him like water around a stone. He watched his son-in-law beg. He watched his daughter, Mallory, frantically trying to order the waiters to bring out more wine, as if a Pinot Noir could fix a securities fraud allegation. Frank looked at the guests, the elite he had wanted so badly to impress. They weren't looking at him with admiration. They were looking at him with pity, or worse, indifference. He wasn't a titan of industry to them. He was just the father-in-law of a toxic asset. The realization hit him harder than my confrontation in the office. I had told him the truth, but seeing it was different. He saw that his standards were nothing but fear. He had been so afraid of being ordinary that he had hitched his wagon to a fraud, and in doing so, he had pushed away the only person who had actually built something real. A waiter, confused by the atmosphere but following his schedule, wheeled out the cake. It was a massive, 3-tier confection decorated with gold leaf and spun sugar. 61 candles flickered on top, casting a warm, dancing light that looked grotesque against the cold, blue mood of the room. "Happy birthday, Mr. Simmons," the waiter whispered. Sensing the tension, Dylan was gone. He had run out to the terrace, his phone glued to his ear, screaming at someone, probably his lawyer, or maybe a voicemail box that was full. Mallory was in the corner, crying into her mother's shoulder, blaming the world, blaming the market, blaming me. Frank stood before the cake. The room was quiet. A few people clapped, a smattering of polite. Dry applause that sounded like dead leaves skittering across pavement. Frank looked at the candles. He didn't make a wish. What was there to wish for? The illusion was dead. The curtain had been ripped down. He took a deep breath and blew. The candles went out. The smoke drifted up, gray and thin, disappearing into the high, vaulted ceiling of the mansion that Det built. Outside, on the terrace, Dylan Wexford stopped screaming. He lowered his phone. The screen illuminated his face, making his skin look like parchment. A notification had just come through from the bank. Alert. Credit facility suspended. Reason covenant breach anchor, withdrawal. Immediate repayment demand. $42 million. Dylan stared at the number. $42 million. He looked back through the glass doors at the party. He saw the dark room. He saw the smoke rising from the cake. He saw his wife crying. And somewhere, in a modest apartment in the city, he knew I was sleeping soundly. I hadn't come to the party. I hadn't made a scene. I had simply signed a piece of paper, and the entire house of cards had collapsed under the weight of its own emptiness. The party was over. The hangover was just beginning. The concrete of the parking structure was cold and gray, amplifying the sound of my footsteps as I walked toward my car. It was Sunday morning. The air was crisp, holding that specific stillness that only exists in business districts on the weekend. I had come into the office to retrieve a file I had forgotten. A trivial task that felt like a sanctuary of normalcy after the chaos of the previous night. I rounded the concrete pillar, keys in hand, and stopped. Leaning against the driver's side door of my 5-year-old sedan was Mallory. My sister looked like a wreckage site. She was wearing large sunglasses that failed to hide the puffiness of her face. Her hair, usually a helmet of expensive highlights and blowout volume, was pulled back into a severe, messy bun. She was wearing a trench coat over leggings, clutching a coffee cup like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. She didn't wait for me to speak. As soon as she saw me, she pushed herself off my car, her movement jerky and aggressive. "You?" she hissed. The word echoed in the empty garage. "You are proud of yourself, aren't you?" I didn't stop walking until I was 6 feet away. "Good morning, Mallory. I assume the party did not go until dawn." "Don't play dumb with me, Sarah," Mallory snapped. Her voice was raw, likely from hours of screaming or crying or both. "You ruined it. You ruined everything. Do you have any idea what it was like last night? People left before the cake was cut. Dylan was humiliated. Dad was just standing there like a statue. And it is all because of you. It is because of me." I asked, keeping my voice low and steady. "I wasn't even there, Mallory. I was at home, watching a documentary. You know what I mean." She screamed, abandoning any pretense of dignity. "You pulled the money. You pulled the anchor. You sent that letter knowing exactly what it would do. You timed it. You wanted to hurt us." "I wanted to protect my investment," I corrected. "That is business." "Business." Mallory laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. "Since when are you a businesswoman? You are a logistics clerk, Sarah. You got lucky with some inheritance money, and now you think you can destroy my husband because you are jealous that we have a life and you have this." She gestured vaguely at my car, at the garage, at my entire existence. I looked at her. I looked at the fear vibrating under her anger. She wasn't mad because I had lost the money. She was mad because I had broken the mirror she used to admire herself. "Mallory," I said, "I have a question for you." "I don't care about your questions." "Did you know?" I asked, cutting over her. She froze. "Know what?" "Did you know that Dylan was using Dad's birthday as a sales pitch?" I asked. "Did you know he was calling Dad a legacy asset in his internal memos? Did you know the party wasn't a celebration, but a desperate attempt to cover up a liquidity crisis?" Mallory's mouth opened, then closed. She looked away. She looked at the ground. She looked at the wall. She looked anywhere but at me. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. It was an admission. "You knew," I said. The disappointment was a cold stone in my stomach. "You knew he was using Dad as a prop, and you let him do it. You helped him do it. You were willing to let Dad be humiliated if the fund collapsed later, just so you could keep playing the role of the CEO's wife." "It wasn't like that," Mallory whispered, her voice trembling. "Dylan said it was standard. He said it was synergy. He said Dad would be proud to help." "Dad didn't know he was helping," I said. "That is the difference. You sold our father out for a country club membership." "I did what I had to do to support my husband," Mallory shouted, her defensive walls slamming back into place. "That is what a wife does, not that you would know. You are just bitter because no one has ever wanted to build a life with you." The insult was meant to draw blood, but it just bounced off. I unlocked my car. "Go home, Mallory," I said. "Tell Dylan to call his lawyer. He's going to need one." "Wait." She lunged forward, grabbing my arm. Her grip was desperate. "You can fix this. Just put the money back. Tell the bank it was a mistake. Please. Sarah, if you don't, they are going to take the house. They are going to take everything. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. I can't put the money back. The trust is gone. And even if I could, I wouldn't. You didn't want me at the party because I didn't meet the standards. Well, Dylan doesn't meet my financial standards. It seems we both have criteria. I pulled my arm free, got into the car, and closed the door. Mallory stood there, screaming at the glass, but I couldn't hear her. I started the engine and drove away, leaving her alone in the gray light of the garage. 20 minutes later, I was in my home office. It was a modest room in a modest apartment, but the technology on my desk was state-of-the-art. I initiated a secure connection. Noah's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired. He was in his office in Chicago, likely having spent the night monitoring the fallout. "Morning, Principal," Noah said. He didn't waste time. "The water is full of sharks today. Halcyon Ridge is bleeding out. I have received 3 emails from a law firm representing Dylan Wexford. They are demanding a meeting with the principal of Juniper Ledger. They are threatening a lawsuit for tortious interference and breach of implied faith." "Let them threaten," I said. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to read the contract," Noah said, adjusting his glasses. "I told them that Juniper Ledger owes no duty to the general partner other than the capital commitment, which is voidable upon breach of confidentiality. I told them that we do not negotiate with entities that violate non-disclosure agreements. I gave them the stone wall." "Good," I said. "However," Noah paused. He looked down at a file on his desk. "In the process of preparing our defense just in case they actually try to sue, I did a deep dive into the data room. I wanted to make sure our justification for withdrawal was bulletproof. I started looking at the valuation models Dylan used for his portfolio companies. And I asked, and I found something ugly." Noah said, "There is a company in Fund 3 called Vortex Logistics. It is a shipping software startup. Dylan has it marked on the books at a valuation of $40 million. He is using that valuation to boost the internal rate of return for the whole fund. It makes his performance look stellar. Is it worth $40 million, Mo?" "Sarah," Noah said grimly, "I ran a check on Vortex. They lost their biggest client 6 months ago. Their CTO quit. They have 3 months of runway left before they are insolvent. A realistic valuation is maybe $2 million, maybe 0. I stared at the screen. "He is marking it up," I said. "He is inflating the value of a dead asset to make the fund look healthy so he can raise money for the new fund." "Exactly," Noah said. "It is classic Ponzi dynamics. You use the new money to cover the holes in the old money. If he had closed Fund 4 yesterday, he would have used that fresh capital to prop up Vortex or buy it out quietly. But since you pulled the plug, the fresh capital is gone. The hole is exposed. This isn't just unethical," I said. "This is securities fraud. If he sent those inflated valuations to investors via mail or wire, it is a federal crime," Noah finished. "Wire fraud, making false statements to investors. If the SEC looks at this, he is not just losing his house, he is going to prison." I sat back. I had intended to teach Dylan a lesson. I had intended to humble him. I had not intended to send the father of my nieces and nephews to a federal penitentiary. The phone on my desk rang. It was my mother. I stared at it. I knew what this call was. Mallory had gone home and reported failure. Now they were sending in the heavy artillery. I answered. "Hello, Mom?" "Sarah." She sounded broken. It was a terrifying sound. Diane Simmons was a woman of iron will, and hearing her sob was like hearing a statue crack. "Mallory told me. She told me you won't help. She said you are doing this on purpose." "I am protecting my assets, Mom," I said. "Dylan lied to me. He lied to everyone. He is family." She wailed. "How can you be so cold? Do you want to destroy this family? Do you want to see your sister on the street? Do you want your father to die of shame? He is sitting in his study and he won't speak. He just stares at the wall. You are killing him. Sarah." I am not killing him, I said. The truth is killing him, and I didn't destroy this family. Mom. You did, she accused. You held on to this secret money. You tricked us. I didn't trick you, I said, my voice rising. I just didn't tell you. And do you know why? Because you never asked. You never looked at me long enough to see anything other than what you wanted to see. The family didn't break today. Mom, the family broke years ago. It broke when you decided that standards were more important than your daughter. It broke when you decided that looking rich was more important than being honest. We did the best we could, she sobbed. We just wanted you to fit in. No, I said. You wanted me to be invisible so I wouldn't spoil the view. Well, I am visible now, and you don't like what you see. I hung up. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally saying the words I had swallowed for 2 decades. 5 minutes later, my email pinged. From Mallory Simmons Wexford, subject to proposal. Sarah, I spoke to Dylan. We are willing to make a deal. If you rescind the withdrawal letter and issue a statement saying it was a clerical error on your end. Dylan is willing to overlook this sabotage. He is willing to offer you a seat on the family advisory board. We will publicly acknowledge your contribution at the next gala. We will welcome you back. We will treat you with the respect you want. But you have to fix this today. This is a one-time offer. Mallory. I read the email twice. He is willing to overlook this sabotage. He is willing to offer you a seat. They were standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath their feet, and they were still trying to negotiate as if they held the high ground. They thought my motivation was a desire for their approval. They thought I was doing this because I wanted a pat on the head and a seat at their table. They still didn't get it. They thought I wanted to be in their club. They couldn't conceive that I might want to burn the club down because it was built on rotten wood. I started to laugh. It bubbled up from my chest, a release of tension that felt almost violent. I laughed at the arrogance. I laughed at the stupidity. I laughed at the one-time offer to save a man who was marking a $0 company at $40 million. I hit reply. I didn't write a long manifesto. I didn't explain my feelings. I typed one sentence. I decline. Then I turned back to the screen where Noah was waiting. Noah, I said. The laughter was gone. My voice was ice. Yes, Principal. If we walk away now, I said, if we just take our money and leave, what happens? Dylan scrambles. Noah analyzed. He finds a predatory lender. He takes a high-interest bridge loan to cover the gap. He keeps the Ponzi scheme going for another 6 months. Maybe a year. Ideally, he finds a new sucker to replace us. He keeps selling the lie about Vortex Logistics until it inevitably implodes. And then a bunch of dentists and pension funds lose their shirts. So if I leave quietly, he hurts other people. I said, yes. Noah agreed. He is desperate. Desperate men do not stop. They double down. I looked at the picture of my family on my desk. It was an old photo, taken 10 years ago. We were all smiling. But even then, I was standing a little to the side, half shadowed by Dylan's arm. I had a choice. I could take my victory, save my money, and let Dylan crash on his own timeline, taking innocent bystanders with him, or I could finish what I started. I could stop the bomb before it detonated in a crowded room. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about responsibility. I was the only one who saw the fraud. That made me the only one who could stop it. Noah, I said, I want to exercise our rights under Section 12 of the Limited Partnership Agreement. Noah's eyes widened. Section 12, that is the for-cause audit provision. Yes, I said. I don't just want to withdraw. I want to commission a full third-party forensic review of the fund's books. Specifically, I want a valuation audit of Vortex Logistics and any other Level 3 assets in the portfolio. Sarah, Noah warned, you know what that means. If we demand a forensic audit, we have to notify the Securities and Exchange Commission that we have reason to suspect material discrepancies. You are not just pulling money out, you are calling the cops. He is inflating assets. Noah, I said, he is lying to investors. He tried to use my father, an innocent old man, as a shield for his fraud. If I let him get away with it, I am complicit. It will go nuclear. Noah said, there is no coming back from this. The family will never speak to you again. I thought about the parking garage. I thought about Mallory screaming that I was jealous. I thought about my mother choosing the lie over the truth. I thought about my father, realizing he was a subject. They are not speaking to me now. I said, they are speaking to a checkbook. Open the investigation. Noah, burn it down. Burn it all down to the ground so no one else gets hurt. Understood, Noah said. He began to type, the sound heavy and final. Initiating forensic review protocol, preparing notification for the SEC. I closed the connection. I sat in silence in my apartment. I had just destroyed my brother-in-law. I had just ensured my sister would lose her mansion. I had just nuked the last bridge to my parents. But for the first time in 38 years, I felt completely, undeniably clean. I wasn't the plow mule anymore. I was the storm. Monday morning arrived not with sunlight, but with a digital barrage. When you corner a rat, it does not debate the finer points of philosophy with you. It bites. And Dylan Wexford was a rat the size of a private equity firm, currently trapped in a corner of his own making. I was in my kitchen, brewing coffee. The silence of my apartment usually brought me peace, but today the air felt charged, static with the electricity of a coming storm. My phone pinged. It was not a text from my family. It was a Google alert I had set up for my own name. I opened the notification. It was a blind item in a popular financial gossip blog. The Street Whisperer. Which mid-level logistics manager suddenly has $5 million to throw around and crush a promising fund? Rumor has it, the anchor in question didn't earn her capital in the boardroom. But in the bedroom, sources say the money belongs to a silent benefactor who is using a jealous, instability-prone woman as a proxy to settle a score. Family insiders suggest mental health struggles have been an ongoing issue. I stared at the screen. The coffee in my mug went cold. Instability-prone. Bedroom capital. Mental health struggles. It was crude. It was misogynistic. And it was pure Dylan. He couldn't attack the math because the math proved he was a fraud, so he was attacking the source. He was trying to discredit the witness before she could take the stand. He was painting a narrative where I wasn't a savvy investor catching a thief, but a hysterical, jealous spinster acting as a puppet for a sugar daddy. It was a strategic masterstroke for the specific audience of my family. It confirmed everything they wanted to believe. It gave them an excuse to ignore the fraud. Oh, Sarah didn't actually earn that money. She is just a front. She is crazy. It let them keep their worldview intact. My front door opened. Most people would have jumped. I didn't. There was only one other person in the world who had a key to my sanctuary, and he was the only person who knew exactly who I was. Richard Fleming walked in. He was wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than my car. His tie loosened, a leather briefcase in his hand. He looked like what he was, a corporate litigation shark who ate other sharks for breakfast. He was also my husband. We had been married for 4 years. My family didn't know. They didn't know because I hadn't invited them to the wedding. I hadn't told them because I refused to let their standards touch the one thing in my life that was purely, unadulteratedly happy, to my parents. I was the lonely single daughter. To Richard, I was the brilliant strategist he came home to. You saw it, Richard asked, placing his briefcase on the counter. He didn't say hello. We were past that. We were in war room mode. The blind item. I asked. Yes, he is calling me a high-priced mistress to discredit the withdrawal. Richard laughed. It was a sharp, dry sound. It is desperate. It is the scorched earth defense. He knows the SEC notification is coming, so he is trying to muddy the waters. If he can paint you as an unreliable narrator, he thinks he can buy time with the other investors. Will it work? I asked. In the court of public opinion, maybe. Richard walked over and poured himself a cup of my coffee. In a court of law, no. But he isn't trying to win a lawsuit. Sarah, he is trying to survive the week. He is trying to keep your father and Mallory from asking why the bank accounts are frozen. He handed me a tablet. Speaking of your father, I looked at the screen. It was a transcript of a voicemail Dylan had left for Frank. Richard had his ways of obtaining things. Being a high-level litigator meant having friends in telecommunications forensics. Dad, listen to me. Do not listen to Sarah. She is sick. I have been looking into it. And that money, it is not hers. She is involved with some older guy, some sketchy developer in Nevada. He is manipulating her. She is doing this because she is jealous of Mallory. You know how she gets. We have to present a united front. If the investors ask, tell them Sarah is having a breakdown. I put the tablet down. He is gaslighting them. And here is the interesting part, Richard said, leaning against the counter. Your father didn't respond. He didn't. No, Richard said. Usually, Frank Simmons would be leading the charge. He would be calling you, screaming about how you are embarrassing the family. But he has been silent for 24 hours. He heard Dylan call you sick, and he didn't join the chorus. He was in the conference room, I said quietly. He saw the documents. He saw me. I think for the first time, the cognitive dissonance is too loud for him to ignore. He is wavering, Richard agreed. But he is not an ally. Not yet. He is terrified. He is watching his legacy burn, and he doesn't know which fire extinguisher to grab. Richard pulled a chair out and sat down. He looked at me, his eyes shifting from the cold lawyer to the man who loved me. Sarah, we need to shift tactics. You have been playing defense. You reacted to the party. You reacted to the lie. Now we attack. But we don't attack with emotion. We don't scream back. We attack with paper. Paper, I repeated. In America, Richard said, tapping the table. You can shoot a man and he might survive, but if you bury him in the right paperwork, he stays dead forever. Dylan is trying to make this a soap opera. We are going to make it a deposition. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick file. I did some digging last night. While you were sleeping the sleep of the righteous, I was trawling through the civil court archives in Arizona and Nevada. And I found a ghost. Richard said he slid a document across the granite island. It was a heavily redacted settlement agreement from 3 years ago. Plaintiff Jane Doe, defendant Halcyon Ridge Partners, GP, nature of complaint, breach of fiduciary duty / misrepresentation of risk. Who is Jane Doe? I asked. Her real name is Elena Rosales. Richard said, she is a retired school administrator. She invested her pension $200,000 in Dylan's second fund. Not a lot of money to him, but everything to her. What happened? She started asking questions. Richard said, she noticed that the dividends weren't matching the reported yields. She tried to withdraw. Dylan threatened her. He told her that if she withdrew early, he would sue her for damaging the fund's reputation. He bullied her. Eventually, he settled. He paid her back her principal no interest. Just her own money back on the condition that she sign a draconian non-disclosure agreement. She cannot speak to the press. She cannot speak to other investors. She cannot even speak to her own family about it. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was one thing to defraud millionaires. It was another to bully a retired teacher. He silenced her, I said, so he could keep the game going. Exactly, Richard said. But here's the beautiful thing about the law. Sarah, a non-disclosure agreement is void if it is used to conceal a crime. You cannot contractually agree to hide a felony. So we find her. I asked. We don't need to find her. Richard smiled, a predatory expression that made me very glad he was on my side. We just need to introduce her complaint to the auditors. The moment the independent auditors see a pattern of suppression, a pattern of silencing investors who ask about liquidity, it stops being a bad business decision and starts being a RICO case. Do it, I said. There is one more thing, Richard said. Dylan reached out to me this morning. I blinked. To you? He doesn't know you. He knows Richard Fleming. The partner at Sterling Croft. Richard corrected. He doesn't know Richard Fleming, the man who cooks you dinner. He sent a request for representation. He wants to hire my firm to sue you. I stared at him. Then, I started to laugh. It was a dark, incredulous laugh. He wants to hire my husband to sue me. He thinks I am the best shark in town. Richard grinned. He wants me to file a defamation suit against Juniper Ledger. He offered a retainer of $50,000. What did you tell him? I told him I was conflicted out. Richard said. I didn't say why. I just said I had a personal interest in the opposing party. We need to end this, I said. He is thrashing. He is dangerous. Agreed, Richard said. He asked for a meeting with a representative of Juniper Ledger. Not a lawyer, a principal. He wants to cut a deal. He wants to bribe me. I said, Precisely. Richard nodded. He thinks everyone has a price because he has a price. I think you should take the call, but not in person. Do it on the secure line. Record it. Let him dig the hole a little deeper. I nodded. I walked over to my secure terminal. I initiated the call protocol, masking my number, routing it through the Chicago server so it looked like I was calling from the Juniper office. I dialed Dylan's personal cell. He answered on the first ring. This is Dylan Wexford. His voice was tight, high-pitched. He sounded like a man who hadn't slept in 48 hours. Mr. Wexford? I said, using a voice modulator that lowered my pitch slightly, stripping it of any familiar cadence. This is the principal of Juniper Ledger. There was a pause. He was probably scrambling to hit record on his end too. I appreciate you taking the call, Dylan said, his voice dropping into his smooth, salesman baritone. It was grotesque how quickly he could switch it on. Look, we have gotten off on the wrong foot. The withdrawal notice, it was aggressive, but I respect aggressive. I respect power. You have 2 minutes, Mr. Wexford. I said, Right, Dylan said. Here is the thing. I know you are unhappy about the pitch deck. I apologize. It was a mistake. But if you proceed with this forensic audit, this SEC thing, nobody wins. You lose your investment. I lose my fund. It is a lose-lose. I am prepared to accept a total loss. I said, Are you? There is no need for that. Dylan said quickly. I have a proposal. We reinstate your capital. We give you preferred status, triple the preferred return, and we bring you on as an honorary advisor to the fund. $50,000 a year consulting fee. No work required. Just guidance. We put your name on the website properly this time. We make you part of the family. Part of the family, I repeated. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Yes, Dylan said. We help each other. We keep this internal. We make the problem go away. And in exchange, you withdraw the notification to the SEC. You say it was a misunderstanding. You say you reviewed the books and everything is clean. You are asking me to lie to the federal government, I said. I am asking you to be a partner. Dylan said, Look, I have a big network. I know people. I can open doors for you. Who are you, really? I bet you are someone who wants to be in the big leagues. I can get you there. I looked at Richard. He was recording everything. He gave me a thumbs up. Mr. Wexford? I said, I am already in the leagues that matter, and I don't take bribes. I take out the trash. Wait. Dylan shouted. Listen to me. You don't know who you are dealing with. I have resources. You have a $40 million hole in your balance sheet where a logistics company used to be, I said. And you have a silent school teacher in Arizona. We know about Elena Rosales. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the silence of a man who hears the click of the guillotine blade releasing. How, he whispered. How do you... Goodbye, Mr. Wexford, I said. I cut the connection. I looked at Richard. We have him. Attempted bribery, Richard noted, checking the file. Confirming knowledge of the fraud, and the reaction to the Rosales name, that is consciousness of guilt. What is the next step? I asked. Richard stood up and closed his briefcase. The click of the latches sounded like a gavel banging. Now, Richard said. "We send the package, not to Dylan, not to his lawyer. We send it to the Independent Monitor. We send it to the Compliance Board, and we send a courtesy copy to the SEC Enforcement Division." "And the family?" I asked. "The family is collateral damage," Richard said gently. "They chose their side. Sarah, now they have to live in the rubble." I sat at my desk. I pulled up the final email. Attached was the dossier, the pitch deck lie, the internal legacy asset memo, the recording of the bribery attempt, and the sealed complaint of Elena Rosales. It was a dossier that would destroy my sister's marriage. It would destroy my father's pride. It would turn the Simmons name into mud in the local community. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. I thought about the little girl who just wanted her dad to look at her. Then I thought about the sugar daddy rumor. I thought about instability prone. I thought about the teacher who lost her pension. I hit send. "It is done," I said. Richard walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. His grip was warm, solid, real. "You are not the plow mule, Sarah," he whispered, kissing the top of my head. "You are the executioner." I leaned into him. The digital packet was flying through the fiber optic cables, racing toward the inboxes of men and women who had the power to put handcuffs on Dylan Wexford. The high standards were finally being applied, and somewhere across town, my father was sitting in his study, staring at a phone that wouldn't ring, wondering why his champion was suddenly so quiet, and why the daughter he had discarded was the only one casting a shadow. The silence of the last 90 days had a texture to it. It was not the empty, hollow silence of abandonment that I had grown up with. It was the heavy, fortified silence of a siege. For 3 months, the Simmons family had been split down the middle by a line drawn in invisible ink and legal subpoenas. On one side were Mallory and Dylan, holed up in their mansion in Cedar Bluff, screaming into voicemails that I never listened to, drowning in a rising tide of legal fees and public speculation. On the other side was me. I had not spoken to my sister. I had blocked her number after the 4th week, when her messages shifted from "please fix this" to threats that were legally actionable. I had not spoken to Dylan, obviously. My only communication with him was through Noah, and those communications were strictly limited to document requests for the forensic audit. And then there was Frank. My father had been a ghost. He had not joined Mallory's chorus of rage. He had not tried to storm my office again. He had simply vanished into the background. A man whose entire identity, the patriarch, the standard-bearer, had been dismantled in a single afternoon in a glass conference room. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I received a text. "Sarah, I will be at the coffee press on 4th Street at 10 in the morning tomorrow. I would like to buy you a cup. No agenda. Just us. Please." It was the please that did it. Frank Simmons did not say please. He negotiated. He commanded. He implied. But he did not beg. I debated ignoring it. Richard told me I had no obligation to go. He said that in a war, you do not meet the opposing general in the middle of the field unless you are ready to surrender or accept a surrender. But this wasn't war. This was the wreckage after the bomb had already gone off. So I went. The coffee press was neutral ground. It was not the country club. It was not a place where titans of industry closed deals. It was a place with mismatched chairs and college students typing on laptops, smelling of roasted beans and rain. I saw him before he saw me. He was sitting at a small table in the back corner, away from the window. He looked smaller. That was the first thing that struck me. My father had always taken up space. He projected a force field of importance. Now, he was just a man in a beige sweater, stirring a black coffee, looking at the steam rising from the cup as if it held the secrets of the universe. I walked over and sat down opposite him. "Hello, Dad," I said. He looked up. His eyes were tired. There were new lines around his mouth, deep grooves carved by 3 months of reality. "Sarah," he said. He didn't smile. He didn't reach out to touch my hand. He just looked at me with a kind of hungry intensity, as if he were trying to memorize my face. "Thank you for coming," I wasn't sure you would. I was curious, I said, keeping my voice even. You said no agenda. No agenda. He agreed. No Dylan, no Mallory, no business. Then why are we here? Frank took a sip of his coffee. He set the cup down carefully, lining the handle up with the edge of the table. It was a nervous tick I had never seen before. I wanted to apologize. He said. I waited. I had heard apologies from him before, but they were always qualified. I am sorry you felt that way. I am sorry you misunderstood. I am sorry. But I am sorry. He said again, his voice rough. I used the word standard like a weapon. I used it to cut you out. I told myself I was doing it for the family, for the image. But that was a lie. I did it because it was easy. It was easier to push you aside than to admit that I didn't understand you. He looked me in the eye. I turned my love for my children into a performance review. If you hit the metrics, you got the affection. If you didn't, you got the silence. I made you earn your place at the table. Sarah, and no child should have to earn their father. The air in the coffee shop seemed to still. This was not the Frank Simmons who lectured me about closing deals. This was a man stripping himself bare. You uninvited me, I said. You told me I would embarrass you. I know. Frank flinched. I was wrong. You were never the embarrassment. Sarah, I was the one who was so insecure about my own standing that I needed everyone around me to look like a magazine cover. I was so afraid of being judged by those people, those sharks, that I sacrificed the only person who actually had a spine. He took a breath. When I stood in that room at the party when I heard them talking, I realized that I had spent 40 years trying to impress people who would eat me alive if I tripped. And the one person who tried to warn me, the one person who actually protected me, was the one I left in the parking lot. It was a good speech. It was eloquent. It hit all the right notes. But I was not the same daughter who used to desperate for crumbs. I was the principal of Juniper Ledger. I dealt in due diligence. I appreciate that, Dad, I said. It sounds very sincere. It is sincere, he insisted. Is it? I leaned forward. Let me ask you a question, and I need you to answer it with the same brutal honesty you claim to value now. Ask me anything, he said. If I was not Juniper Ledger, I said. If I was really just Sarah from operations. If I had no millions, no power to crush Dylan, no secret leverage. If I was just the mid-level manager you thought I was 3 months ago, would you be sitting here? I watched him. I watched his eyes. This was the test. If he said, yes, of course, because you are my daughter, I would know he was lying. I would walk out and never look back. Because 3 months ago, he hadn't cared. He only cared now because I had proven I was the strongest player in the game. Frank opened his mouth to answer. Then he stopped. He looked down at his coffee. He looked at his hands, which were resting on the scarred wood of the table. He was silent for a long time. A barista ground beans loudly in the background. I want to say yes, Frank said softly. I want to tell you that I would have woken up and realized my mistake on my own. I want to be the hero in this story. He looked up at me. His eyes were wet, but steady. But I can't, he said. The truth is, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I was so deep in the delusion. Sarah, I was so convinced that Dylan was the future, and you were the safety net. If you hadn't burned the house down, I might have stayed asleep. I might have gone to my grave thinking I was right. He took a sharp breath. I hate admitting that. It makes me a terrible father. But you asked for the truth. The truth is, I didn't respect you enough to see you until you forced me to. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was the most painful thing he could have said. It confirmed that his love had been conditional, but it was also the only honest thing he could have said. He didn't try to rewrite history. He owned his blindness. Thank you, I said, for not lying. I am done lying. Frank said, to you, to myself. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. For a second, I tensed, expecting a legal document or a letter from Mallory. Instead, he pulled out a photograph. It was old, the edges worn white. He slid it across the table. I looked down. It was a picture from 1998. I was 16 years old. I was wearing oversized coveralls that were stained with black grease. I was standing next to a beat-up Ford sedan that I had bought for $500 from a scrapyard. My hair was a mess. My face was smudged with oil. But I was grinning. I was holding a wrench like it was a scepter. I had just rebuilt the transmission on my own. "I found this in the attic," Frank said. "I was looking for I don't know what I was looking for, but I found this." I touched the photo. I remembered that day. I remembered the feeling of the engine finally turning over, the vibration of it in my chest. I remembered running inside to tell my dad, and him nodding vaguely before going back to his phone call. "I looked at this picture last night," Frank said, "and I realized something. You were always this person. You were always the mechanic. You were always the one who wanted to know how things worked, who wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty to fix something broken." He pointed at the girl in the photo. "I forgot she existed. I tried to put her in a dress and make her a receptionist, but she was always there, the genius who built a fortune right under my nose. She is the same girl who fixed that transmission when she was 16. I just stopped looking." "You did," I said. "You looked right through me." "I know," Frank said. "And I can't fix that. I can't give you back the last 20 years. I can't undo the party. I can't undo the way I made you feel small so I could feel big." He leaned forward. "But I am asking for a chance to know the woman who built the engine this time, not the ops girl. I want to know who you are. Sarah." I looked at the photo, then at him. I had spent my life wanting this. I had spent decades achieving, saving, investing, all in the secret hope that one day he would see me. And now he did. But he didn't see me because I asked him to. He saw me because I had forced him to. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a clean slate. The damage was there, woven into the fabric of us. But it was a start. "I have conditions," I said. "Name them." Frank said immediately. "We meet once a month," I said. "Here, or somewhere like here. Not the house, not the club, just us." "Done," he said. "We do not talk about Dylan." I continued. "We do not talk about Mallory. I am not your bridge to them. I am not your negotiator. If you want to complain about the lawsuit, talk to your lawyer. If you want to talk about how sad Mallory is, talk to your wife. With me, that topic is dead." Frank flinched slightly, but he nodded. "Understood. The topic is dead. And one more thing," I said. "You never, ever talk to me about standards again if I show up in sweatpants. You drink your coffee, and you ask me about my day. You do not comment on my life choices. You forfeited the right to judge me when you uninvited me." "I accept," Frank said. "I accept all of it." He held out his hand across the table. It was a formal gesture, but his hand was shaking slightly. I looked at it. I thought about the little girl with the wrench. I thought about the woman with the portfolio. They were both me. And for the first time, my father was willing to shake hands with both of them. I reached out and took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and desperate. "Okay," I said. "One coffee, once a month." "Thank you," Frank whispered. He looked like a man who had just been granted a stay of execution. We sat there for another 30 minutes. We didn't talk about much. We talked about the weather. We talked about a book he was reading. It was awkward. It was stilted. But it was real. It was the first honest conversation we had ever had. When we walked out of the coffee shop, the sun was high overhead. "I will see you in 4 weeks," Frank asked, standing by his car, a modest sedan he must have rented or bought recently, not the luxury SUV he used to drive. 4 weeks. I confirmed. He hesitated, as if he wanted to hug me, but he knew he hadn't earned that yet. He nodded, got in his car, and drove away. I stood on the sidewalk, watching him go. I felt a strange lightness in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. Forgiveness is a heavy word. It was more like clarity. I had defined the boundaries, and he had respected them. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a secure message from Noah. I unlocked the screen. The lightness in my chest vanished instantly, replaced by the cold, heavy weight of the blade I was still holding. From Noah Klein. Subject: Forensic Review / Final Report. Priority: Critical, Sarah. The auditors just finished the deep dive into Vortex Logistics and the Level 3 assets. I have the preliminary summary. It is worse than we thought. It is not just inflated valuations. We found a secondary ledger. Dylan wasn't just cooking the books to impress investors. He was moving cash directly from the operating accounts of portfolio companies into a shell entity in the Cayman Islands. Sarah. The shell entity is listed under a co-signatory. I am sending the file now. You need to sit down. I stared at the screen. The street noise faded away. The co-signatory, my father had just apologized. He had just told me he wanted to know me. He had just claimed he was blind to the details. But if there was a co-signatory on an offshore account, I looked down the street where Frank's car had disappeared. A terrible, icy dread settled over me. I had started this to teach them a lesson about standards. I had started this to reveal the truth. But truth is like a fire. Once you light it, you cannot control what it burns. I opened the file. I stared at the name on the screen. Mallory Simmons Wexford. My sister was the co-signatory on the offshore shell company. She had signed the documents that allowed Dylan to siphon cash from portfolio companies into a private slush fund in the Caymans. Whether she knew what she was signing, more likely, had simply signed where Dylan pointed without reading a single word. She was legally complicit. She wasn't just a bystander protecting her lifestyle anymore. She was a partner in the crime. I closed the laptop. The coffee shop meeting with my father felt like it had happened in a different lifetime. Though it had been less than an hour ago, he wanted to rebuild. He wanted to know me, but he didn't know that the other half of his legacy was currently dangling over a precipice of federal indictment. I went back to my apartment and waited. The storm I had summoned was no longer a weather event. It was a climate change. 3 hours later, the video link with Noah opened again. He looked grim, the blue light of his monitors reflecting in his glasses. "We have the final synthesis," Noah said. His voice was clipped, professional, the voice of a man reading an autopsy report. "It is not just the offshore account, that is bad, but the structural fraud is worse. Dylan has been polishing the fund's performance for 18 months. "Explain it," I said. He was backdating the recording of profitable trades and delaying the recording of losses. Noah explained. If a portfolio company had a bad quarter, he would push the reporting of that loss into the next fiscal period to keep the current quarter looking stable. He was smoothing out the volatility to create an illusion of perfect, steady growth. It is the kind of thing that works until you have a liquidity event like an anchor investor pulling out, and the auditors have to look at the actual cash flow versus the reported value. "And now they are looking," I said. "They are staring," Noah corrected. The independent auditor refused to sign off on the quarterly results this morning. That triggered an automatic default notice from the prime broker. The bank has seized the collateral. They have frozen the operating accounts of Halcyon Ridge. The credit line is dead. Sarah, the company is effectively insolvent as of 45 minutes ago. Does Dylan know? He knows, Noah said. He is currently trying to spin it. He sent a memo to the remaining limited partners claiming that this is a temporary, administrative freeze caused by a hostile action from a single irrational investor. That is you. He is still blaming me. I said. He has no one else left to blame. Noah said. But the data is not on his side. The institutional investors are not buying it. They are demanding a capital call to cover the shortfall, and Dylan doesn't have the cash. The walls are closing in. I nodded. Keep watching him. Noah, I want to know when he breaks. The break came that evening. My doorbell rang. It was urgent. A frantic, repeated stabbing of the button. I checked the security camera. It was Mallory. She looked worse than she had in the parking garage. She looked like a woman who had been running for days. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hair wild. She wasn't wearing her quiet luxury armor. She was wearing sweatpants and a coat she hadn't buttoned. I opened the door. She didn't scream this time. She didn't attack. She fell to her knees. "Sarah," she sobbed. "Please, you have to stop. They are going to take him away." I looked down at my sister. I had spent my life envying her beauty, her ease, the way she glided through life while I trudged. Now, I only felt a profound, exhausting pity. "Get up, Mallory," I said. "I can't," she cried, grabbing the hem of my pants. The FBI was at the office. They took boxes. They took his computer. He is sitting on the floor of the bathroom and he won't move. He says you can stop it. He says if you put the money back, if you vouch for the valuation, the bank will back off. Please, Sarah, for the family, for Mom and Dad, do not let them put him in jail." I reached down and pulled her up. I led her to the sofa. She sat there, shaking, a broken doll in a designer coat. "I cannot stop the FBI, Mallory," I said, "and I cannot put the money back. The money isn't the problem. The lies are the problem." "He didn't mean to," she pleaded. "He was just trying to fix it. He was going to pay it back once the new fund closed. He did it for us. He did it for himself." I said, "And you helped him." She froze. "What?" I saw the signature. "Mallory," I said softly. "The Cayman account. You signed it." Her face went white. "I just signed what he gave me. He said it was for tax planning. I didn't read it. I trust my husband." "That trust is going to cost you everything." I said, "But there is one way out. One way to save yourself, and maybe save a shred of dignity for this family." "Anything," she whispered. "I will do anything. I will issue a statement." I said, "I will tell the auditors that while I have withdrawn my capital, I am willing to provide a temporary bridge loan to cover the immediate payroll of the portfolio companies so the innocent employees don't lose their paychecks." Mallory's eyes lit up with hope. "You will?" "Oh, Sarah, thank you, thank you. Condition." I cut her off. "There is a condition." "What is it?" "Dylan resigns." I said, "Tonight, he issues a public statement admitting to accounting irregularities and steps down as CEO of Halcyon Ridge. He cooperates fully with the investigators. He pleads guilty. No more spinning. No more blaming me. He owns it." Mallory recoiled, as if I had slapped her. "He can't resign if he resigns. He admits he is a failure. He will be ruined. We will be pariahs." "He is already ruined, Mallory," I said. "The choice is whether he goes down with a shred of honesty or drags you all down screaming lies." "He won't do it," she said, shaking her head. "He is Dylan Wexford. He doesn't quit. And if he resigns, what happens to me? I am the wife of a CEO. Who am I if he is a criminal?" I looked at her, even at the edge of the abyss. She was worried about the title on her business card. "Then I can't help you." I said, "If the image matters more to you than the truth, then you have made your choice. You are a monster," she whispered, standing up. The gratitude was gone, replaced instantly by the old entitlement. "You could save us with a signature, and you won't. You want to see us fall." "I want to see you stand," I said. "On your own feet. For once." She ran out. The door slammed. I sat in the silence. I had offered the lifeline. She had refused to grab it because it required letting go of the illusion. 2 hours later, the end came. But it didn't come from me, and it didn't come from Mallory. It came from the board. Noah sent me the update in real time. The board of directors of Halcyon Ridge. A group of men and women who had happily eaten Dylan's lobster and drunk his wine for years had convened an emergency meeting. Faced with the forensic report, the frozen accounts, and the threat of investor lawsuits. They did the only thing corporate creatures do when threatened. They ate their own. Breaking Halcyon Ridge. Partners Board votes to remove Dylan Wexford as CEO. Effective immediately, CFO appointed as interim manager to oversee liquidation of assets. It wasn't a resignation, it was a termination. They had fired him. The invincible Dylan Wexford, the man who had sneered at my job in operations. The man who had uninvited me to keep his standards high, had been stripped of his title by a vote of 6-0. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt a cold, hard resolution. The system had worked. It was brutal, but it was accurate. My phone rang. It was Frank. It was almost midnight. I picked up. Dad. I heard. Frank said. His voice was unrecognizable. It sounded like gravel grinding against bone. I heard on the news. They fired him. They are talking about criminal charges. I know, I said. Mallory is here, Frank said. She is in her old room. She is hysterical. She says you offered to help, and then you took it back. I offered a condition, I said. She refused it. There was a long silence on the line. I braced myself for the anger. I braced myself for him to tell me I was cruel, that I should have just written the check. You were right, Frank said. I blinked. What? I have been sitting here, Frank said, his voice slow and heavy. Thinking about what you said at the coffee shop, thinking about the legacy asset memo, and I realized something. Sarah, I used my standards to push you away because you didn't look the part. And I used those same standards to help Dylan because he did look the part. He took a jagged breath. I vouched for him. I introduced him to my friends. I let him use my name. I helped him build the trap that he caught all those people in. I am not a victim. Sarah, I am an accomplice. Dad, I said softly, you didn't know about the fraud. I didn't want to know, Frank corrected. That is the same thing. I saw the flash, and I ignored the substance. And now people are hurt. That teacher in Arizona. The one Richard found, I read about her. She lost her pension because of a fund I endorsed. He was crying now. Quiet. Awful sobs of a man realizing his vanity had a body count. I created this. Frank wept. I taught you that love was conditional on success, and I taught Mallory that appearance was more important than reality. I broke both of you. You didn't break me, I said firmly. I fixed myself. Remember the transmission? I remember. He choked out. God, I remember. Listen to me, Dad, I said. You can't fix Dylan. You can't fix Mallory right now. She has to hit the bottom before she can climb out. But you can stop pretending. That is the only way out of this. Stop the performance. I don't know if I can, he admitted. I am 61 years old. I don't know who I am without the applause. You are Frank, I said. Just Frank, and that is enough for me. He was silent for a moment. I am going to sell the house. He said suddenly, the big house. I can't afford it if I'm going to help pay for Mallory's legal defense and maybe try to make some restitution to the people Dylan hurt. I don't want to live in a monument anymore. That sounds like a plan, I said. Will you... He hesitated. Will you come over? Not to fix it. Just to be there. I looked at the clock. I looked at the file on my desk. I looked at the empty apartment that I had built with my own hands. Not tonight, Dad, I said. Tonight, you need to sit with the mess. You need to see it clearly, but I will see you for coffee. In 4 weeks. 4 weeks. He repeated. Okay, okay. We hung up. I sat there in the dark. I could have gone over. I could have written a check to pay for the lawyers. I could have used my millions to smooth the road for them, to hush up the scandal, to make everything nice again. But that would have been the old Sarah. That would have been the Sarah who bought affection with service. The new Sarah knew better. You cannot save people from the gravity of their own choices. Dylan had chosen to lie. Mallory had chosen to hide. Frank had chosen to look away. They had to live in the world they had built, and I had to live in mine. My phone pinged one last time. It was a text from Noah. FY. I Halcyon Ridge. Just filed for Chapter 11 restructuring. The flagship fund is being dissolved. The assets are being liquidated to pay creditors. It is over. Sarah, the building has fallen. I looked at the words. It is over. I didn't reply. I deleted the message. I reached across my desk and picked up the photo Frank had given me. The 16-year-old girl in the grease-stained coveralls grinned back at me. She looked tired. She looked dirty. But she looked proud. She didn't need a tuxedo. She didn't need a mansion. She had built something that worked. And she knew exactly how every gear turned. I placed the photo next to my computer. Some bridges burned down and can never be crossed again. I would never trust Mallory or Dylan again. That part of my life was ash. But the bridge to my father, it was scorched. It was shaky. But for the first time, it was being built on solid ground. I turned off the lamp. The screen of my laptop went black. The office was dark. But I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I knew how to navigate it. I was Sarah Simmons. I worked in operations. And I had just closed the biggest deal of my life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Sarah's journey from being the uninvited daughter to the one who redefined the standards. I would love to know, where are you listening to this story right now? Are you at work, driving, or maybe relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to chat with you. If you enjoyed this corporate thriller, please subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and if you really want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Your support means the world to us.